Nobody wants a widowed sister who is just a cheap single mom with baggage. Victoria's voice rang through the Savannah ballroom, dripping with a practiced condescension that she had spent 28 years perfecting. She smiled at the 300 guests as if she had just delivered the ultimate punchline. My mother, Michelle, did not stop her. Instead, she leaned into the microphone and laughed, asking the room if anyone was interested in taking me home as a souvenir. The room erupted in cruel, expensive amusement. My name is Sarah, and I am 32 years old. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family. But standing there, I realized the subscription had expired. This was not a tragedy, it was a final accounting. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I would love to know who is part of our community right now. 11:51 p.m. That was the exact moment the debt matured. Victoria thought she was buying a laugh at my expense, but all she did was sign the termination papers for my silence. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I did not even look back at the 300 witnesses to my supposed downfall. I simply turned around and walked out of those ballroom doors, the heavy oak closing behind me with a sound that felt like a final click in an accounting ledger. The Savannah night was thick with humidity and the scent of jasmine, but I felt clinical. I felt precise. I did not drive back to the house. Michelle still claimed as a sanctuary. I drove straight to my workshop. The smell of old wood and turpentine met me at the door, a smell that usually meant peace, but tonight, it meant business. On my easel sat the centerpiece for their upcoming family exhibition, a life-size portrait of Victoria. For 3 months, I had been the silent technician of her vanity. I had spent hundreds of hours of my specialized labor that usually costs high-end galleries tens of thousands of dollars, to make her look like she had a soul. I had meticulously restored the cracked oil, deepened the hues of her eyes, and smoothed the arrogance from her jawline until she looked like the graceful aristocrat Michelle desperately wanted the world to see. It was a gift, they told me, my contribution to the family legacy. Now, I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill while they overdrafted my compassion. I set my bag down and reached for a bottle of professional-grade solvent. My hands were steady. There was no panic, no heat in my chest, just the cold, hard logic of a balance sheet that no longer balanced. I dipped a clean rag into the liquid. This was not revenge. It was accounting. I began to wipe. With every stroke, Victoria's face dissolved. The grace I had painted back into her eyes smeared into a murky gray. The softened jawline I had reconstructed became a hollow, distorted mess of raw canvas. I watched the perfect sister they presented to the world turn back into what she actually was, a void, a hollow, dark space where a human being should have been. I did not stop until her face was a black hole in the center of an ornate gold frame. I looked at my watch, 12:03 a.m., retaliation complete. It had taken exactly 12 minutes to undo months of invisible care. They were not shocked by what they had done to me in that ballroom. They were just comfortable with my compliance. They assumed my loyalty was a permanent asset. They forgot that even the most valuable assets can be liquidated. I sat at my desk and pulled up my private laptop. I did not check social media. I did not look at the hundreds of texts I knew were waiting to ask if I was okay. I did not need their pity. I needed my records. I opened the file containing the trust documents for my daughter, Olivia. $2 million. That was the amount my husband had left to ensure she would never have to beg for a place at any table. And tonight, I was going to find out exactly where every cent of it had gone. Inside, my workshop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I pulled a small silver frame from my desk drawer. My husband's eyes looked back at me, kind, steady, and full of a future that had been stolen 10 years ago. For a long time, I wondered how I let it get this far. How I let Michelle turn me into the family's ghost, while she lived in a mansion built on my grief. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. They thought I was weak, because I stayed quiet while they drained my daughter Livia's trust fund, $2 million intended for her education and security. People look at situations like mine and ask, why didn't you just leave? They do not understand that psychological abuse is a prison without bars. I was not just Sarah, I was a survivor navigating a minefield. My silence was not a choice. It was a strategy to keep Michelle's poison away from my daughter. I became the shield, accepting the insults and the invisible role of the servant, so Olivia could have a chance to grow up without knowing she was hated by her own grandmother. It was a survival mechanism, a chain forged from the need to protect the only piece of my husband I had left. This is what the world calls learned helplessness. But for me, it was calculated endurance. I stayed because if I left, Michelle would have turned her focus on Olivia. I stayed to gather the evidence I now held in my hands. While they were busy choosing napkin colors and belittling my wardrobe, I was tracking every wire transfer, every forged signature, and every cent they stole from a grieving child. The total was staggering. $2 million gone. Michelle and Victoria had treated my daughter's future like an open line of credit. They believed that because I did not fight back when they mocked me, I would not fight back when they robbed us. They mistook my patience for a lack of a pulse. They did not realize that in my world, numbers always settle their accounts. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. I looked at the dark, empty face of Victoria on the canvas across the room. She wanted to be a star. I was about to give her the kind of fame that does not go away with the refresh button. I touched the cold glass of the photo frame one last time. I am done being the shield, I whispered. It is time to become the sword. Victoria did not wait for the dust to settle. By dawn, she had already uploaded a video to her 1 million followers titled "The Family Secret My Sister Tried to Hide." She was not just mocking me anymore, she was monetizing me. She sat in front of a ring light, her eyes artificially damp, telling her audience how unstable I had become since my husband passed. She called me a burden, a charity case that her saintly mother had tried to save for years. She was using my trauma as content, turning my quiet grief into a viral spectacle to boost her engagement rates. To her, my pain was just another trend to be exploited. Then my phone rang. Michelle. There was no "how are you?" and certainly no "I am sorry for what happened at the ballroom." Her voice was a razor blade, cold and serrated. "You've made a mess, Sarah," she hissed, skipping the greeting entirely. "Victoria is distraught. You ruined her wedding day with that little stunt. Now, listen carefully. I want the remaining insurance papers and the final payout from your husband's policy. If those documents are not on my desk by tomorrow, I will call my lawyers and have you declared an unfit mother. I will take Olivia away from you before the week is over." It was a classic escalation. They were not shocked by their own cruelty. They were just angry that I had stopped being their silent technician. I sat in the dark of my workshop, the phone resting on the desk, as I recorded every word of her threat. I did not interrupt. I let her reveal the absolute depth of her entitlement. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and now they were trying to foreclose on my life. This is what I call the trap of normalized cruelty. To Michelle, exploiting me was not a crime. It was a duty. She had spent so long convincing herself that my husband's legacy belonged to the Henderson family name that she truly believed stealing $2 million from her own granddaughter was a form of justice. In her twisted logic, she was not a thief. She was a guardian of the family status. She had normalized her greed until it looked like morality to her. She had spent a decade telling herself that I was too weak and too simple to handle such a massive inheritance, making her betrayal feel like a responsible management decision rather than the act of a criminal. "Are you still there, you ungrateful girl?" Michelle barked into the phone. I looked at the audio levels on my laptop. The recording was perfect. Each wave of her voice was a data point in her own prosecution. "I'm here," I said, my voice clinical. "And I'm currently auditing a very interesting set of numbers." "I don't care about your numbers. I care about the Henderson legacy," she screamed. I did not answer her. I simply ended the call. Anger was not loud this time. It was a balance sheet. I watched Victoria's video view count climb. 100,000 views, 200,000. Every new follower she gained was another witness I did not have to hire. They were so busy attacking me that they did not realize they were documenting their own bankruptcy of character and of soul. I went back to my spreadsheet, my eyes scanning the discrepancies in the forgeable signatures. Calm, factual, and lethal. The knock on my workshop door at 2 a.m. did not startle me. I was already wide awake, my mind a revolving door of numbers and forensic details. I expected my mother or a furious Victoria, but instead, it was Tyler, the man who was supposed to be starting his honeymoon. He stood there in a dark suit, stripped of his wedding tie, looking more like a corporate liquidator than a newlywed. He did not offer a romantic gesture or a single word of comfort. He simply set a heavy, black leather portfolio on my workbench. I've spent 3 years tracking these transactions, he said, his voice as cold and precise as a scalpel. It's time you saw the full audit. I opened the portfolio. Inside were digital forensic reports that transformed my suspicions into a criminal reality. Tyler had not just been observing my family, he had been investigating them. The documents proved that Michelle had not just been managing the estate. She had systematically forged my husband's signature on a series of amendments to his will. The total amount misappropriated was exactly $2 million, the entirety of Olivia's intended security. The signatures were expertly done, but Tyler's team had used high-resolution spectral analysis to prove the ink on the documents did not even exist 10 years ago. It was a chronological impossibility. Why? I asked, my voice sounding detached even to my own ears. Why would you marry Victoria if you knew they were criminals? Tyler stepped into the harsh glare of my restoration lamp and unbuttoned the top of his shirt, revealing the edge of a surgical scar that ran deep into his chest. 10 years ago, I was dying of heart failure, he said, his gaze locked on mine. Your husband's final act was to give me his heart. I've spent a decade carrying the very thing that loved you, and I was not going to let these people destroy his legacy. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with a biological debt I never knew existed. Tyler revealed that he had initially tried to approach the family as a benefactor, but he quickly saw the toxic hierarchy Michelle had established. He realized that Sarah, the widow they treated as a burden, was the only one worth his loyalty. I married Victoria to gain legal standing as a family member, he explained, his tone completely transactional. I needed unrestricted access to the Henderson family's offshore accounts and internal records. I had to become the son-in-law, to become the whistleblower. This was the professional escalation that ended the game. Tyler was not just a savior. He was a biological extension of the husband I had lost, armed with a billion-dollar tech empire and a team of the best forensic accountants in the country. He looked at the portrait of Victoria I had dissolved earlier, the one that was now just a dark, empty void, and gave a sharp, clinical nod. The criminal complaint has been filed. The $2 million in stolen assets have been frozen. This is not a family drama anymore, Sarah. This is a total liquidation of their assets and their freedom. Calm, factual, and lethal. The accounting was finally finished. They showed up at my doorstep at 10 a.m., but they were not the polished aristocrats I had seen in the Savannah ballroom. Victoria's designer dress was wrinkled, and her eyes were red from a night of watching her viral notoriety turn into a digital lynch mob. Michelle looked a decade older, her face etched with the sudden, sharp reality of a poverty she had never known. Tyler's first act after leaving my workshop was to pull every cent of his $1,500,000 investment from the Henderson family accounts. Without his capital to bridge their debts, the family empire was nothing more than a house of cards. In a hurricane, the bank had already arrived at dawn to begin the formal seizure and sealing of the Henderson estate. My mother fell to her knees on my carpet, her fingers clawing at my slacks, as if they were the only lifeline left in her crumbling world. "Sarah, please," she wailed, her voice cracking with a desperation that was entirely new to her. "They're taking the house. We have nothing. You cannot do this to your own mother. We are family." I looked down at her and felt nothing but a clean, sharp sense of closure. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and now the account was permanently closed. I did not reach down to help her up. I did not offer a tissue. Family is not a blood type. Michelle, I said, my voice clinical and flat. It is a contract. And you breached it the moment you forged my husband's signature to steal $2 million from your own granddaughter. Victoria looked at me with a mixture of terror and a lingering, pathetic arrogance. You're destroying us over a few numbers? She hissed, her voice trembling. I did not flinch. To me, she was not a threat anymore. She was just a bad entry in a ledger that needed to be zeroed out. I am not destroying you, I said. I am just enforcing the terms of the choices you made when you thought I was too weak to read the fine print. I picked up the folder Tyler had given me and dropped a copy of the formal lawsuit and the criminal summons onto the table between us. I am not taking anything that is not already mine, I said, my tone as cold as an audit. I am just reclaiming the goodbye you owe my husband, the one you tried to turn into a profit margin, for your own vanity. Victoria looked at the papers, her hands shaking, as the reality of her situation finally settled in. The cheap single mom they had mocked was now the only person with the legal standing to determine their future. Tyler stepped out from the hallway, his presence filling the room with a lethal, quiet authority. He walked over to Olivia, who was standing by the window, and gently took her hand in his. He looked at my mother with a gaze that seemed to carry the collective weight of 10 years of stolen heartbeats. I will take them, he said, his voice low and unwavering. It was not a romantic declaration. It was a hostile takeover of our future, from the hands of people who never deserved it. I carry the heart of the man you betrayed. And from this moment on, the name Henderson will be synonymous with the fraud you committed, not the status you tried to buy with his life. My mother looked at him, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. She finally realized that the baggage she had ridiculed was actually the only thing of true value left in the family. I did not wait for her to find her words. I had already spent too many years listening to her noise. I already gave you my silence for 10 years, Michelle, I said. I have no more assets to give you. Goodbye. I opened the door and watched the ghosts of my past walk out into a Savannah morning that no longer belonged to them. I closed the lock, the one I had paid for with my own hard-earned money, and for the first time, the silence did not feel like a prison. It felt like a balance sheet that finally perfectly hit zero. The final audit was completed 3 months later, in a courtroom that smelled of old paper and the cold reality of the law. Michelle and Victoria did not have any more tricks left. The forensic evidence Tyler provided was an airtight case of forgery and financial exploitation. The judge's gavel did not sound like a weapon to me. It sounded like the final entry in a 10-year-long balance sheet. $2 million were ordered to be returned to my daughter Olivia's trust fund immediately. Restitution was not just a legal term that day. It was the sound of my husband's legacy being scrubbed clean of the Henderson family's filth. Michelle and Victoria's downfall was swift and clinical. Tyler had liquidated every investment he held in their name, leaving them with exactly $0 in their accounts. The Savannah mansion, once the altar of their vanity, was sold to cover their legal debts and the restitution they owed us. Last I heard, my mother was living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place she used to call a slum. Victoria's career as a personality died the moment the truth about her grandmother's fraud went viral. You cannot sell a lifestyle built on stolen heartbeats. She tried to rebrand, but the comment sections were a constant audit of her character. Eventually, she moved away quietly, becoming just another ghost in a city that had outgrown her noise. As for me, I did not spend a single cent of that recovered money on myself. This was not about personal profit, it was about the proper allocation of resources. I established the New Life Fund, a foundation dedicated to providing legal support and financial counseling for young widows and widowers who are being exploited by their own families. I knew firsthand how easily greed can wear the mask of family duty, and I wanted to make sure no other woman had to endure a decade of silent imprisonment. There is a profound difference between the justice of punishment and the justice of the sower. Punishment is a reactive force. It looks backward at the crime and tries to balance the pain with more pain. But the justice of the sower is proactive. It looks at the empty field left behind by the storm and decides to plant something that will actually grow. My foundation was my ultimate move for justice. It made the Henderson family's cruelty look small, petty, and ultimately irrelevant. I did not need to destroy them anymore. I just needed to build a world where people like them could never thrive again. Today, my workshop in Savannah is filled with a different kind of light. I still restore antiques, but I no longer do it to maintain a lie. I do it because I love the process of revealing the truth beneath the grime. Tyler's often there, helping Olivia with her homework or showing her how to use a digital camera. He still carries the heart that once belonged to my husband. And sometimes, when he looks at me, I can feel that old familiar warmth, a biological bridge between my past and my future. We are not rushing into anything, we are just being human together, which is a luxury I have not had for a long time. I looked at the canvas where Victoria's portrait used to be. It is blank now, waiting for a new story. I watched Olivia draw a rocket ship blasting through a field of stars, her laughter echoing against the high ceilings. For years, I thought love was something you had to earn through self-sacrifice and silence. I thought being useful was the only way to be wanted. I was wrong. Love is not a debt you pay. It is a capital you build. In standing here in the sun, I finally realized that my daughter was never my baggage. She was my anchor. And Tyler was not my savior. He was my partner in a hostile takeover of a life I almost lost. The silence in my home no longer feels like a prison. It feels like a clean ledger. No debt, no noise, just the peaceful rhythm of three hearts, building something that will outlast any legacy built on greed. For the first time in my life, the numbers add up perfectly. If you believe that justice should always be followed by the courage to grow something new, hit like and share this story to spread hope to anyone still trapped in silence. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next journey of resilience and truth. Thank you for being part of our community.